The gas station sat on the edge of town like a small, steady light. Its fluorescent bulbs hummed in the evening air and threw a pale rectangle of light across cracked asphalt. The pumps had seen many cars that day, a steady line of people with tired faces and small errands, and now, as the sun slipped behind low hills, the lot filled with a thin, cooling breeze and the smell of gasoline. Inside, a single long counter held a jar of hard candies and a faded calendar. Behind the counter, a young man named Alex wiped his palms on a towel. He had taken the night shift because the extra hours helped him send a little money home. He was new enough to notice small things that others ignored and old enough to know when a person needed help. The woman who came to the pump that evening moved slowly, with a quiet, careful gait. She wore a plain coat and a soft scarf that framed her face. Her hair was more silver than it once had been, cut in a neat style that suggested a lifetime of small, tidy choices. She wore sensible shoes and carried a woven bag that had a tiny repair where a strap had been sewn back together. Her hands had the faint tremor of arthritis, the kind that came from years of stirring pots and sewing hems and turning pages in books. She did not walk quickly because she did not need to, and because she liked to notice small things: how the light hit the pumps, the way the air smelled before rain, the way the town's name looked on the road sign. When she reached the pump, she clicked off the car and leaned on the sill the way people do when they are used to doing routine tasks with care. She moved with a kind of quiet dignity that did not ask for attention. A few people glanced and then returned to their own small worlds: a nurse pulling her jacket tight against the wind, a delivery driver who checked his route on his phone, a pair of teenagers in a compact car arguing softly about which chips to buy. The town at that hour felt ordinary in the way quiet evenings do, familiar, a little worn, safe enough. Then a sound broke the ordinary evening: the low, urgent roar of motorcycles. 4 bikes came into the lot like a sudden gust. Their engines growled and their headlights cut the dusk into bright lanes. The men who rode them wore heavy leather vests and boots that scraped when they moved. They brought with them the smell of oil and smoke and the kind of loudness that tried to fill a room. The leader rode at the front, a man whose presence felt like it had been practiced and polished for the effect it had on others. He coasted to a stop near the pumps and killed his engine, making the sudden quiet feel heavier. They did not come through the lot slowly the way people sometimes do. They pulled up, swung off their bikes, and moved with the easy confidence of those who expect the whole world to notice them. The leader pushed his helmet back, revealing a face that had spent more years carving lines of bravado than kindness. He laughed loudly and threw a glance around the station, the kind of look that asked whether anyone would give him trouble for taking space. His friends clustered behind him, trading small jokes and throwing challenging looks at anyone who dared to watch. They noticed the woman immediately, not because she stood out in some bright way, but because she was alone and quiet. In crowds, lonely things attract attention. The leader walked toward her as if toward prey, but with the kind of practiced smile meant to confuse. He leaned on his bike and called out in a voice that tried to sound rougher than it needed to be. "You lost, Grandma," he said. The words were meant to be a joke, a line to get a laugh from his friends. The sound of it, however, struck odd chords. A few heads turned. Alex felt the hair on his arms prick. He had seen people joke in ways that cut under the surface, and he'd seen how small things could turn ugly fast. The woman did not flinch or laugh. She looked up slowly and met his eyes. Her gaze was calm and steady, like someone used to looking at slow things in life: old trees, the sea on a quiet day, faces that have learned to tell truth without yelling. "I only need a little gas," she said in a voice that was soft but not weak. Her words were like the tap of a spoon on a cup, they were precise and clear. That reply should have ended it. Some men would have stepped back with a grin and let the moment pass. But the leader bristled at being answered plainly. For him, attention was a currency, being noticed was power. He took her calm as a challenge rather than a condition. He made another joke, this time sharper. His friends laughed and leaned in. One of them whistled. The nurse clutched her bag and pulled her jacket tight. The delivery driver looked down and fumbled with his keys. Alex kept his eyes on the register, but his fingers stopped moving, as if the act of counting money had become beside the point. The leader moved closer to the woman, a little too close for polite space. He reached out and pretended to pat her shoulder, the gesture of a man who wanted to mark territory. The move smelled of oil and arrogance. The woman did not pull away. Her body had learned, over many years, how to hold itself without risking humiliation. She smiled in a small, tired way and said, "You must be very tired." It was not an insult. It was a quiet reading of a man who wanted the world to see only the surface. For a moment, something changed in the circle. The leader blinked as if he had been handed a mirror he had not expected. His friends looked at him with an uncertain air, as if the joke had stopped being funny. The nurse paused in her steps. The teenagers rolled down their window and watched. The world around the pumps felt slightly unsteady, like a cart that sways before it rights itself. The woman reached into her bag and took out a small paper packet. It was not much, a simple thing, one that might have held candy or a small note. She offered it to the leader with the gentle manner of someone offering a neighbor a cup of sugar. "You boys look like you could use a sweet," she said. The gesture was absurd for the situation. It was also disarming. The leader took the packet slowly and unwrapped it. He chewed, and the simple act of eating knocked some of the edge out of his posture. People do strange things when they are moved by small kindness. The laughs inside the group faded into softer murmurs. One of the bikers, younger and more restless than the others, rolled his cigarette between his fingers and watched in silence. The leader's mouth moved as if forming another joke, then closed. The moment thinned and the air lost its dangerous edge like fog easing from a field. Alex's phone had begun to record before he knew why. He stood behind the glass and filmed the strange exchange, the way light fell on the woman's face, the leader's abrupt softness. He felt the image of the moment might be worth more than himself, as if the small act might teach anyone about what mattered. He kept his camera hidden because he was not sure how the story would land. The bakery owner across the street later saw Alex's clip and thought it should be shared, but at the time no one knew what it would become. The leader and his friends mounted their bikes when they finished fueling. They were loud when they left, but the noise no longer felt threatening. One of them called back, "You're lucky we're in a good mood," with a grin that tried to patch an earlier sting. The woman watched them go. She tucked her scarf, closed the car door, and started the engine with a slow, deliberate movement. A few people offered her a polite nod. The nurse returned to her car and smiled in the rear view. Alex kept watching until the tail lights disappeared into darkness, and then he stepped back into the store as if returning from a small, inward journey. For the woman, the evening had been a small chapter in a life that moved by small chapters. She had a house with curtains she liked to close at evening, a kettle that whistled when it boiled, and a son who called sometimes from far away. She did not want attention. She did not yearn for the light of cameras. She simply did what she had always done, step into the world with a quiet heart and meet whatever came with dignity. Yet the scene at the pumps had a little, stubborn life of its own. A neighbor who ran the bakery had watched from her window and, later, posted Alex's clip on a local community page with a short note, "Watch this. This is how our town treats one another." To some, it was nothing, a minor evening incident in a small town. To others, it was enough to start a conversation. The gas station returned to its ordinary rhythm. The pump clicks, the coffee machine hisses, the register rings, but the memory of the moment hung in the air like a song's last note, waiting to be picked up by someone who might hum it out loud. The clip moved faster than anyone in the town expected. Alex had never meant for his small video to travel beyond the window of the gas station. He had wanted only to save a moment he found strange and a little brave. He uploaded the clip to a local community page because he thought neighbors should know how their town treated its own. The bakery owner saw it and shared it. Then other people shared it again. In a few hours the clip left the town and crept into other feeds. People who had never been to that station watched an older woman meet a group of loud bikers with calm and a little candy. The way she offered the sweet and the way the leader softened made the clip feel like a short story in moving pictures. Comments came in fast. Some people praised the woman for her kindness. They said she had taught the bikers a lesson without shouting. Others scolded the bikers. They called them rude and careless. People argued about what the moment meant. A few wrote that the woman had shown the kind of dignity the world needed. Others wondered if the bikers would change. The clip made people talk, and when people talk on the internet, the talk grows legs. Soon, someone noticed what others had missed at first: the woman looked familiar. A name began to float in the comments. It started as a question: is that Keanu Reeves' mother? And then became a claim. The suggestion spread because it matched a picture some people remembered from old interviews and family photos. When a famous name appears near a quiet clip, curiosity sharpens into a kind of hunger. The story drew more views. People who liked to chase small mysteries began to look at old photos and compare faces. The comments filled with guesses, with praise, and with people saying the woman should have known better than to be alone. The woman was not seeking attention. She liked the calm of her life. She liked quiet mornings and small routines. She did not want to be on screens. But the world did not always let things stay quiet. The phone on her kitchen table rang with numbers she did not know. A reporter called and asked gentle questions. Someone knocked on her door and asked for an interview. The knocks and calls piled up like rain on an old roof. She answered what she needed to answer and then closed the curtains. She told a neighbor that she was tired of the noise. She liked to keep her privacy and she wanted no fuss. A freelance reporter came to the station the next morning and asked to speak with Alex. He wanted to know who had filmed and why. Alex felt nervous under the reporter's polite eagerness. He explained simply. The reporter wanted permission to use the clip. Alex said yes because he thought the world might use the short film to learn something. The reporter wrote a small piece, and that piece was picked up by a larger site. Once that happened, the clip jumped again and landed on pages where people left sharp words and warm ones by the dozen. The woman's face was now in locations her son never expected. The son called from far away when he heard the buzz. He asked his mother if she was all right. She smiled and told him everything was fine. He spoke in a voice that mixed surprise with comfort, the way sons speak when they want to protect mothers who have kept them safe. He told her he had seen the clip and that he liked how she had answered rudeness with calm. He asked if she wanted him to come. She said no. She said she had enough company. She liked the kettle that whistled when it boiled and the thin light that came through the curtains in the morning. He did not come. He trusted her to stay herself. Online, people began to build stories around the clip that had little to do with the woman's life. Some made jokes. Some wrote articles that stretched the truth. A few tried to trace the woman's address and to find more photos. The town felt strange under the weight of strangers who wanted small pieces of a private life. Neighbors called one another and said they should be careful about what they posted. The bakery owner put a note on her window asking people to be kind. The small town's quiet that once arrived with twilight now had a twilight of its own, one filled with questions and replies from people who had no idea what it meant to live here. The leader of the bikers watched the clip on his phone in a bar where the lights were low and the air smelled of coffee and fry oil. He saw himself laughing and leaning close to a woman who smiled back without fear. For the first time he watched his own face as others would. It felt foreign and cruel. The jokes that had landed for a friend's laugh now landed on the world's stage and felt small and ugly. He felt a sting he had not expected, a mix of embarrassment and a slow, sharp shame. He had trouble sleeping. The anger he once used to fill empty spaces in his life seemed hollow when replayed to others. At first he tried to laugh the whole thing off. His friends called him a fool and offered excuses. They said everyone makes a joke sometimes. But the leader could not shake what he felt when he watched the woman's calm. He remembered how her hand had moved when she offered the candy, how she had looked at him with a steady patience. The feeling built like a weight on his chest, the kind that asks a person to look inward. He did not want to be seen as mean. He did not want his face to be the one people pointed at. His need for approval, which had pushed him to be loud and rude, began to look different when the world held him up to itself. Some of his friends reacted the same as before. They made light of it and posted crude jokes on pages that fed off outrage. Others, quieter men, felt bad. One of them told the leader, "That woman had nothing to prove." "We did." The leader could not forget those words. He felt a desire to make amends, though he did not know what that would look like or if it would be accepted. Making an apology on the internet felt hollow. Standing before someone and saying sorry felt real. He began to think of the small acts that might show change. The woman, for her part, saw the world both near and far. She read a few of the kind comments and smiled. Some people reminded her of the kind acts she had known in life. Other messages were loud and invasive, as if strangers had a right to a piece of her day. She called a friend and said she wished the noise would stop. "I only wanted to buy gas," she told her friend in a slow voice that held warmth and weariness. Her friend promised to stop by and bring tea. The kettle would still sing. The garden would still need tending. The clip also revealed something subtle about the town. Old lines of care showed up in unexpected places. The clerk at the gas station, who had recorded history without meaning to, felt a strange mix of pride and shame. He had seen a woman meet trouble with dignity and had captured it in a moment that rippled. The bakery owner, who had shared the clip, felt the weight of attention and wished it had never left the town. A few people who had watched immediately reached out to the bikers and offered to speak for them in gentler ways. Someone suggested a small gathering where the town could talk about what had happened and about how to be kinder. A small council met in the back room of the diner the next week. Neighbors talked in slow, careful sentences. They spoke of safety, of decency, and of how to care for quiet people who did not want the light. Plans were made not for headlines, but for small steps: a neighborhood watch to help people feel safer at night, a monthly sign-up to check on older residents, and a promise to be more mindful before sharing images of others. The town, in its quiet way, tried to mend the small break the clip had made. And in the midst of it all, the woman continued to move through her days. She went to the market. She boiled kettles. She patted plants and mended a sleeve with fingers that remembered how to stitch. The world had pushed a bright light for a moment into her private life, but she held her day like a small, sturdy thing. When a stranger came by offering help, she politely declined. When a neighbor showed up with a plate of biscuits, she accepted and thanked them with a smile that warmed like the first sip of tea. The clip, which had begun as a brief instant at a gas pump, had become a mirror held up to many people. For some it showed how to be kind. For others it showed the danger of reaching into private lives. For the leader it began the slow work of seeing himself differently. For the town it was a reminder that small acts can shine wider than anyone expects. And for the woman, it was a brief disturbance in a life that had always found its center in small comforts and steady routine. She had not sought the scene, but she had met it as she always did, with quiet and with care. The little video did what small things can do now. It grew beyond the edges of the town and into places that had nothing to do with the gas station. Alex had meant only to save a strange, quiet moment. He had not wanted a crowd or a headline. He had only wanted to keep a piece of time that felt important to him. He uploaded the clip to the local community page with a short note. The bakery owner shared it. A neighbor shared it again. What began as a neighborly nudge became a string of shares and then a chain of strangers watching a woman meet loudness with calm. At first the attention was simple and kind. People praised the woman in comments and wrote things like, "That is how we wish everyone would be." Others defended the biker group and said it had been only words, nothing meant to harm. The clip made some people smile, made others shake their heads. But once the video left the town, it met strong currents on the internet, currents that push curiosity and rumor faster than truth. Somewhere in the wave of shares a single comment appeared. It started small, a question typed in by someone who thought they knew what they saw: is that Keanu Reeves' mother? The name pulled at the knot of curiosity. When a famous name hits a small story, people lean in. Others replied and argued about looks and old interviews and family photographs. People who liked to solve small puzzles began to hunt for evidence. Old pictures were posted and compared, and the question that had been a casual comment grew like a seed into a vine of interest that wrapped the clip in new meaning. For the woman, the new attention arrived as a slow rain. Her phone began to ring with numbers she did not know. A few calls were polite. Reporters said they only wanted a few lines, a small statement. One reporter from a larger outlet came by the gas station and spoke to Alex. He asked where the woman had parked, what time she had been there, whether Alex had spoken to her. Alex answered honestly and simply. He told the reporter the truth as he saw it. He had recorded a moment that felt like a lesson. He had not meant to pull anyone's life into the light. The reporter left with a few notes and a small piece that ran the next morning. Once the clip and that piece appeared on a bigger site, the story leapt again. Now it was not only the town seeing the woman. People in towns far away watched and argued. Some joked and some praised. Others felt annoyed that strangers peered into a private life. The woman felt an odd flutter in her chest when she closed her curtains and counted the ringing on her table. For someone who liked peace, the world's loudness came as a surprise. Her son heard about the clip from a friend before he saw it for himself. He called her quickly. His voice was warm and steady and a little amused when he asked if she was all right. She told him she had enough tea and the kettle was fine. He asked if he should come see her. She said no. She liked her quiet house and her garden and she trusted her son to understand. He said he would keep an eye from afar and hang up, the way sons sometimes do when they want to be helpful without taking over. Not everyone reacted gently. Some people felt the internet gave them permission to reach into the woman's life. A few messages were too eager, too curious, wanting to know where she lived or what she did every day. The town felt this pressure as if it were someone leaning on a fence. Neighbors called each other and checked on the woman. The bakery owner put a note in the shop window asking for kindness and urging people to respect privacy. The town's little routines held, but a new element of watchfulness threaded through them. In another place, the leader of the biker group watched his own face on a small screen and felt a strange hollow. He had been loud that night because noise made him feel big. He had thought jokes would buy him respect from his friends. Seeing the clip played back to him from other people's eyes hurt in a way that no laugh had before. The leader found himself watching carefully, trying to notice how he had looked and how others saw him when he fancied himself a leader. The laughter that had once felt light now seemed small and cruel. At first he tried jokes to cover the feeling. He laughed with friends and said it had been nothing. But the more he thought, the more the memory of the woman's steady face followed him like a shadow. He remembered how she had offered candy as if offering a small gift instead of anger. The memory pricked him in a place where pride met shame. He began to wonder if being loud had always been his way of hiding something he did not like in himself. The thought made him uneasy, and that unease turned toward the idea of apology, not the shouting kind of apology on a page, but a real, awkward, human apology that happens when two people speak face to face. As the story moved, others in distant towns began to think they had a piece of the scene. An old acquaintance of the woman's, a man who had once been at a family gathering many years before, saw the clip and recognized the woman's face. He remembered a photograph he had taken at the time, an informal picture with people sitting around a table, laughing and passing plates. In that small photograph the woman was younger, but her smile and the shape of her eyes matched what the man had seen on the video. He saved the photo and, with the innocent thought of sharing a memory, he posted it to a social site with a short note, "I think this might be her." That small note did something unplanned. People looked at the old photograph and compared it frame by frame with the clip. A pattern formed in the minds of those who wanted a neat answer. The woman in the video could be the mother of the actor people knew. Some were careful and spoke with restraint. Others rushed to fill gaps with loud guesses. The private life of a woman who liked a kettle and a garden had, very quickly, joined a public story about fame and family. The town felt the weight of all this attention. Where once people had whispered and nodded politely at the pump, now some neighbors found themselves watching to see if strangers passed by. The coffee shop owner noticed more cars with unusual plates. The clerk at the gas station found himself answering questions from people who wanted to know every small detail. He felt strange seeing his small recording turned into a public thing. He had only hoped the clip would teach something kind. Instead it had become a net that caught too many curious hands. In quiet pockets of the town, conversations began to change. Friends who had once sat on porches and talked of weather now spoke about boundaries and decency. A few people suggested writing to the larger sites to ask them to stop chasing private lives. An older woman at the church said, with the blunt calm of someone who had seen public attention before, "Fame moves like wind. It can lift and it can scratch. We must remember the person who stands in the middle." Her words reminded some of the town that the real life of the woman had roots deeper than a video. Meanwhile, someone in a coastal cafe mentioned the clip to a friend who had worked in film years earlier. They spoke softly, as if speaking too loudly might bring more eyes. The friend had a memory, a photograph tucked away in a drawer somewhere, taken decades ago at a small family meal. He found it and, with an ache for accuracy rather than for gossip, he shared it with a small caption. That old photograph became a quiet key for those who sought proof. The internet, which loves quick conclusions, moved faster than the slow, patient work of people checking their hearts. As the woman's privacy thinned before her, she did what she had always done when things felt too bright: she closed the curtains and cooked something simple. She read a little and sat by the window to watch the light move through her garden. Sometimes she thought of the young men at the pump and the way they had tried to shove the world into a joke. She thought about how she had offered the packet of candy because she had wanted to meet the moment with less harm, not because she wanted to teach a lesson. For her, that evening had been nothing more than a small act of simple kindness. Still, the world kept moving. Messages arrived. A local reporter asked more questions. People argued online about right and kindness. The leader of the bikers sat many nights and looked at the clip until he felt the edges of his old bravado begin to fray. He wanted, in a way he could not yet name, to try to be different. Then, one slow afternoon when the air smelled of rain, a car pulled quietly onto the woman's street and stopped beneath the maple tree outside her house. The engine hummed softly and the driver sat still for a moment as if to steady himself. He stepped out with small, careful steps and walked up the path to her door. He did not bring a camera or a crowd. He only carried the difficult thing that some people bring when they want to set right what they once set wrong: his own quiet apology waiting to be spoken. The man who had come to the woman's door wore his apology like a small, heavy coat. He had not come to make a show. He had not come with cameras or speeches. He had come with the quiet kind of courage that makes a person feel awkward and humble. He knocked once and waited. When she opened the door, he could see the kettle on the stove and the soft light that came through the curtains. He felt both ashamed and strangely light, as if saying the truth out loud might take some weight from his chest. He introduced himself in a voice that traveled low and careful. He told her his name, and then he said he had come to apologize for how he had behaved at the gas station. His words were simple. They shook a little at first. "I was wrong," he said. "I thought it was a joke. I did not see you." The woman listened without hurry. She put out 2 cups and filled the kettle. The sound the water made as it warmed seemed to give them both time to be honest. The man spoke not to explain but to show he had thought about what he had done. He spoke about the emptiness he had felt when his loudness had left little in his life that felt true. He talked about the nights he had made himself appear larger than he felt inside. He did not ask for forgiveness like it was a trophy he deserved. He offered his apology the way someone might offer a hand across a table, steady and without demand. She watched him with a kind of patience that had come from years of living with small problems and solving them one by one. When he finished, she did not scold. She did not make the moment into a lesson for others. She set the cups on the table and poured the tea. "People hurt," she said quietly. "People are scared and sometimes they put up loud walls so others cannot see." Her voice was gentle, and it made the man's shame move into a shape that felt less heavy, less sharp. He could breathe a little easier. They sat and talked. The conversation moved slowly. He said he had begun to watch the clip to understand how others saw him, and the more he watched the more he felt a need to change. He had thought of the woman's calm and felt ashamed that he had once tried to push her into the edges of the world. He wanted to make amends in a way that mattered, not just in words. He asked, awkwardly, if there was anything he could do to help. She thought for a moment and then said she had nothing she needed fixed. She had friends who looked in on her. She had a kettle that worked and a garden that kept her busy. Still, she told him that if he wanted to show he had changed, he could start by paying attention to small things, helping neighbors who were lonely, listening more than speaking, and being careful not to make others feel small. The man listened like someone who had been given a map and did not know which path to take first. When he left her small house that day, he did not ride off to boast. He walked to his bike with a slow, new steadiness. Over the next weeks his actions spoke more than anything he could say. He returned to the gas station to pay for repairs where a bike had scraped a pump. He started going to the diner more often, not to shout but to sit and listen to older men tell simple stories about weather and work. He found a job helping a friend with small repairs and learned the satisfaction that comes from steady labor. The work was messy and honest, and it fit him. The new routine made him feel like someone who did not need to pretend. His friends noticed. Some laughed and said he was soft. Others were puzzled. A few were curious and came to see what had changed. The leader did not force anyone to follow him. He did not make speeches. He simply did things that matched his apology. He volunteered sometimes at a small community food bank. He mended a fence for a neighbor who could not do it alone. He began to bring a box of fresh coffee and rolls to the gas station some mornings and left them quietly on the counter with a small note, "For the people who work early." Little acts like that began to change how people saw him. The bakery owner who had first shared the clip watched him from behind the glass one morning and saw him hand a paper bag to an older man on the bench outside. The older man bowed his head slightly and said thank you. The leader walked away without looking for praise. Those small moments built slowly. People do not always change all at once. Change is like a slow repair to a roof, you replace one shingle at a time. The leader also gathered his friends one evening and told them he wanted to do something together for the town. He suggested they clean up some graffiti on the underpass and then hold a small event at the gas station to raise money for a local charity. Some of his friends agreed and some did not. Those who joined helped paint daylight colors on concrete walls and scrub the old oil stains from the station's driveway. They worked with hands that were greasy and careful, and their work made the place look less angry. The town noticed. People began to speak in softer tones about the bikers. Old judgments softened into cautious curiosity. Parents brought children to watch pickup games of tossed football on Saturdays, and a few of the younger bikers showed the kids how to check a bicycle's tire or fix a broken chain. Those small connections mattered. They turned strangers into neighbors in ways neither side had expected. When it came time for the small charity event, the leader stood quietly at the side and let others speak. The town's pastor said a few words about kindness and about owning mistakes. The woman who had been at the pump came and stood among the small crowd without drawing attention. She did not want applause. She wanted the town to have a reason to gather that was not about gossip. The event raised money for a charity that helped older residents get small home repairs done. People bought coffee, small pies, and wooden toys made by a local craftsman. The sum they collected was not large, but it mattered because it came from neighbors who had begun to act as neighbors. After the event, a few of the bikers painted a small sign and hung it at the gas station. It read simply, "We are sorry." The sign was not a parade or a big headline. It was a small wood sign, slightly crooked, that sometimes caught the light in the evening. People who passed would slow, read it, and some nodded. The leader who had once been loud stood beside it one afternoon and fixed the last nail. He did not look for pictures to post. He simply hammered and walked away with grease on his hands and a quietness in his step. The woman watched these changes with a gentle calm. She did not think she had taught the bikers anything. She believed in small acts and small choices. She knew that a person could be brave without shouting, and that a life of small, steady care would, in time, show what mattered. She kept her mornings simple. She still tended her garden and fixed hems. Sometimes the leader stopped by to give a bag of harvested tomatoes he had bought from the market, and she accepted them the way one accepts a neighbor's help with a small smile and thanks. The son, who had watched the story from afar, kept a quiet distance. He sent a short message to his mother once, "I'm proud of you." She answered with a little joke about the kettle and the weather. Fame did not change the way she lived. She liked tea and the smell of rain. She liked small cups and the soft sound of clean dishes. She did not want her life to be a story on screens. She wanted it to be honest and shared with people she knew. The gas station itself became a place of small meetings. People who once drove past with closed windows now stopped and talked. Someone started a small bookshelf by the counter where people left books for others to take. The clerk, Alex, put out a tip jar for the local shelter and sometimes handed a free coffee to a delivery driver who looked tired. The place had not changed in grand ways. Pumps still clicked and lights still hummed. But the tone of the lot had softened. The memory of that windy night remained, but it no longer burned like a brand. It cooled into a lesson people could carry with them. Not every day was perfect. Arguments still happened in town. Some of the leader's old friends never came around. They said he had gone soft and that his apology meant nothing. But most people saw enough to know someone had tried to change. The true test of apology is not whether everyone forgives but whether the person who made the mistake keeps trying to be different. In the end, the small acts made more room in the town for ordinary kindness. The leader learned to quiet his voice and to place work above loudness. His friends learned that listening matters. The woman kept her privacy and the life she loved. The town kept telling the story of the night at the pump, but now they told it with a new shape, not as a moment of shame alone but as the start of something better. The world, made of many small choices, moved on. People mended fences and tea kettles and, slowly, the hard edges of the town grew softer. The weeks after the charity event moved like the slow, steady flow of a river. Nothing dramatic happened. The loud headlines that once flashed across screens grew quiet. Cameras and strangers drifted away as other stories filled the news. The town returned, in most ways, to its ordinary pattern of days. Yet something of that night had changed in small, useful ways, and those changes kept showing themselves in simple acts. The woman's mornings went on as they always had. She rose with the light, put the kettle on, and fed the birds at the edge of her garden. She walked the rows of beans and tomatoes and checked the soil with an old, sure hand. She mended clothes for neighbors who asked and baked a pie now and then for someone who needed company. She kept her curtains drawn when she wanted privacy and opened them wide when the sun was soft. Fame had brushed past her life and left only a thin mark she could ignore. She liked it that way. Her pleasures were quiet, they were the small things that fit into the palms of her hands. Her son sent short messages from time to time. He did not come to town often. That was the way his life had long been. He moved in a different world with different demands. But he called sometimes to ask about her garden or to say something small that made her smile. Once, he sent a note after the event, "You handled that with more grace than I ever could. Thank you." She read it quietly and felt the warmth of him close to her, even when he was far away. She said little in reply, a few words about tea and rain. That was enough for them both. At the gas station, Alex kept the little bookshelf he had started. It grew slowly. People left paperbacks they had finished. They took ones they wanted to read. Some left small notes inside pages for strangers to find, a joke, a line of encouragement, a recipe. The jar for the shelter stayed on the counter. Some mornings the jar was full and Alex would hand a warm coffee to a weary driver and smile in a way that said, "We see you." The gas pump still clicked. The fluorescent lights still hummed. But the station felt more like a place where people could stop and be noticed, not a place where people hurried past one another. The leader of the bikers kept working at quiet repairs. He did not find it easy to change. Old habits pull like tides. There were nights when he wanted to feel big again and let noise cover the ache. At those times he remembered sitting in the woman's small kitchen and holding a cup of tea while she listened. He remembered the ordinary sound of a kettle and the calm in her voice. Those memories helped him choose a different path more often than not. He took jobs that kept him busy with his hands. He learned carpentry and fixed doors and steps for people who could not do the work themselves. He showed up at the station sometimes early before the sun rose, to sweep the lot and check the air in tires. He did these things not to be praised but because doing them felt right. Gifts of time and labor are heavy in this way, the man who gives them changes slowly, and the world around him feels the difference. Some of his old friends never came around. They made jokes and shrugged away the change. But others surprised him. A few young men who had once laughed the loudest began to ask questions. They wanted to know how to help their neighbors. They learned to patch a wall or plant a tree. The leader did not preach. He simply worked and sometimes helped teach a younger rider how to mix cement or sew a torn bag. The small acts of skill gave them purpose that was quieter and steadier than shouting. The town built on the small momentum. The community circle at the gas station turned into a monthly event. Neighbors met to swap repairs, to trade recipes, to teach each other small crafts. Someone offered a free class in fixing a bike chain. Another person taught how to preserve tomatoes for winter. Children came with questions and sticky hands. People who had once been strangers found reasons to help one another. The group did not solve every problem. It did not take away every fear. But it made more ways for people to meet face to face, and that lessened the room for mean words to grow. Local reporters wrote follow-up pieces now and then. They were kinder than before. They spoke about small towns trying to repair small harms. They mentioned the woman's simple acts and the leader's slow work. The stories were short and gentle. They did not demand private details. The reporters learned something about how to tell a story without tugging too hard on other people's lives. That change was small, but it mattered to those who liked the town's quiet. Sometimes, months later, a stranger would stop at the gas station and ask about the sign that hung there for a while, "We are sorry." The leader had taken it down after a year because it had served its purpose. But people still asked. When asked, neighbors would tell the story slowly, not as a piece of gossip but as a memory that taught a lesson, that people could change and that small kindnesses mattered more than loud apologies. The woman rarely spoke about being recognized. When a neighbor mentioned it, she smiled and pointed to her garden. "There's always work to do," she would say. She meant it. She believed work was the shape of a life. She liked fixing a sleeve. She liked watering a row of beans. Those simple chores steadied her. They grounded her in a way that cameras could not. Every now and then, someone with a camera would drive through town. They would stop, ask a few questions, and then leave. The woman did not go out of her way to avoid them. She simply moved as she had always moved. She was polite when needed and reserved when not. Her life did not belong to headlines. It belonged to the people who lived near her, to the friends who dropped by with a pie, and to the son who called sometimes from far away. Years passed and the memory of the clip grew soft. Children who had been small at the time told the story in a different voice. They told it to other children as a way to explain what kindness looks like. The leader, older and with a few more lines at his eyes, sometimes sat on the bench outside the station and watched people come and go. He no longer needed loudness to feel seen. He felt enough in the quiet work he did. He would occasionally meet the woman when she came to town. They would nod and talk about small things: the weather, a new batch of tomatoes, a recipe for soup. They had both changed in tiny ways, and that mutual change needed no grand ceremony. The town did not become perfect. People still made mistakes. New conflicts arose over time, as they always do. But the place had learned a lesson that stayed: small acts matter. A cup of tea and a simple apology can shift the shape of a person's life. A sign that reads "We are sorry" can be a beginning, not an end. People learned to look for opportunities to help instead of ways to be seen. In the woman's kitchen she kept a small tin of candy on the shelf. It was not there as a tool or a lesson. It was simply something she liked to share. Once, when a young man stopped by to ask for directions, she offered him one. He took it and smiled. He left with a lighter step. That small exchange showed, again, how simple things travel farther than people expect. When she sat in her garden at dawn, with birds calling and light spilling across the soil, she thought rarely of the clip. Her life had its usual small rhythms. But sometimes, when a neighbor walked by and said hello, or when a young man fixed a fence without being asked, she felt the quiet satisfaction of a life lived in small, steady care. She understood, in the way people do who have had many quiet years, that the world is both larger and kinder when people choose small acts of decency more often than not. And so the town went on, with days that were ordinary and sometimes tender. The gas pumps kept their steady clicks, the kettle on her stove sang now and then, and the leader's hands grew used from useful work. The story of the night at the pump became, in time, a piece of the town's shape, not the whole thing, but a part that taught a simple truth: when a person meets rudeness with dignity, and when another person answers shame with honest work, small changes can ripple outward and make a place kinder for a little longer.